even worry about it. My legendary styling.
Hola, ¿cómo estás? So, welcome everyone. I've been competing in the chess.com online daily tournament, I think it's called. I'm currently sitting top of the group with 20 out of 22. And yeah, we're just going to go through a couple of my games. Most of them are pretty trivial because it's only the first round and the players obviously aren't going to be as strong, but they were still relatively interesting. Okay, so first game I start off with the white pieces. I'm against my main contender in this group, basically 1325 rated. And I start off with e4. My opponent plays c5 and we go to a Sicilian. I don't really have much experience against the Sicilian, but in the few games that I have, I've been trying out the Grand Prix attack. And essentially we get a perfect Grand Prix position where we bring our bishop out to c4, castle, and eventually play the move d3. The plans are you want to go queen e1, try and play f5 at some point once they've castled, and you can basically expose their king, and the queen's got easy access out to these diagonals here. So he goes knight f6, which I think is a slight inaccuracy because what you're meant to do is actually bring it out to e7 and prepare this d5 break, which basically just shuts down the bishop. So, and then I bring my queen over to e1, and we basically have the perfect position. Sometimes you also do play g3, but in this instance, we want our queen to have access to this diagonal here. So I go for queen e1, and then he goes for this e5 move. I can understand it in terms of he's trying to open up his bishop, but it's actually an inaccuracy, and I don't capitalize. Instead, I play f5, and as you can see, the engine does not approve. What I should have done actually is traded in the center here. And the reason I didn't want to do this was because I wanted to try and keep the center a bit closed, because I know that having a closed center tends to favor the attacking side, and that was going to be me. But essentially what the engine wants is trading. I think it wants knight g5, yeah, knight g5, targeting this weak pawn. If you castle, the queen's coming into h4, targeting here. And if you try and defend it, for example, with either h6 or h5, you just have knight takes f7. What does it want? Not takes it. Oh, you can take, or you can go bishop g5, which is just some destructively weird. If you play h6, you can't do that. So if the engine wants this, takes, and then it wants to. Okay, and then it wants takes again. King takes, and essentially you're going to open up the entire position here. And the king has just got no safety. You've got your rook on this open file. So I didn't actually see that, and instead, in the spirit of the Grand Prix, I played this move f5, which essentially I want to just open up the king, even though he hasn't castled yet. But what he does now is castle, so it all works out perfectly. And then, yeah, so I basically strip away the defenses of the king, and I bring my queen out to g3. And engine does not approve. What does the engine want? It wants, so essentially it wants this combination of knight and queen coming in here and going for some sort of checkmate. I did see this in the game, but I just thought that it was just easily defendable somehow. Oh, I think maybe I just thought knight h5. What do you do here? Knight g5. Oh, rook takes f7. Oh, you just have so much pressure once this knight moves. Oh, I didn't see that. I guess the open file for the rook is just so powerful. So I didn't see any of that. Instead I played queen g3. Opponent centralizes his knight, which I think is a pretty good move. And then I blunder terribly with this awful move, which at the time I was like, oh yeah, this is great. Because the opponent can't recapture here. Eventually I was going to bring my knight in, then I'd have an open file for my rook, and then we'd be threatening checkmate basically in one move. So the reason that this is a blunder is because the opponent has this move d5, which essentially just completely, I lose my bishop I think in the end. If, for example, I just move my bishop away, queen is gone. The only way to save the queen is either just move the queen away, which then loses the bishop, or I take and then I get an extra pawn. So I didn't see that at all, but neither did my opponent, and my opponent just completely ignored everything and went for knight takes c2, which, yeah, as you can tell by the evaluation, essentially loses the game on the spot. Most clinical is actually bishop h6. Now looking at it, yeah, that looks pretty disgusting. I don't even know how you defend against that. So bring my knight into g5, threatening checkmate in 1 after I get rid of this knight here. My opponent brings out his bishop out to e6, essentially forcing me to trade, because otherwise, if I just move my bishop, queen will be gone from the board. So we trade bishops, and now I was trying to calculate some crazy lines here. The main idea was to sacrifice my rook, which Engine says that is dreadful. Initially I was thinking, so we captures here, it's checkmate in 1. We captures like this, you can't even do that because you're pinned. And I was like, okay, so rook takes, then check on h7, the king's got only square to move is over here. And then I thought, maybe we can sacrifice the knight again. Keep trying to fork these pieces here. Then we got rook takes, and I thought, bring my queen back, forking the king and the rook. If you try and defend it, bishop comes into g5 here, and you're winning again. Obviously, if king just goes somewhere else, you're taking the rook. But the most simple move here, I think, is just to block with the rook again. Then after here, I didn't see a continuation, and obviously it's -6, so there is no continuation, unfortunately. But I was trying to calculate some of these lines here, and I just couldn't quite find the knockout blow, essentially. So what I did instead was I just took e6 with my knight, forking these 2 pieces. He moves the queen, I go in for this rook here, he recaptures here. At this point, you've got to remember my rook is actually still hanging from about 5 moves ago. So I just slide my rook over to b1, get out of danger, and then he plays b5, which I don't really understand. Essentially, I'm going to try and win this knight here, and b5 there's nothing against that. So I play bishop out to g5, putting enormous pressure on here. He slides his queen over, which he's trying to defend his knight here, but he's just pinned himself, and it's going to be a catastrophe after my knight jumps into d5. And then I win his knight here, and the game is basically over. His king's got essentially no safety. And I win with the white pieces. A pretty good game, apart from my blunder. It's not even a hard move to find, essentially. And we both completely missed it, so that was quite lucky, I think. But I ended up getting the win. And then we can move on to my game with black against this geezer. So now my second game as the black pieces against our 1300 rated opponent, PM Hamo. He starts off with d4. I'm assuming he's going for a London setup. Against d4, what I normally play is just knight f6, because I think it's quite a flexible move. And indeed, he does go for the London. So I play d5, he goes for more London stuff, and then essentially I go for this c5 break, which is the way I like to play against the London, just trying to be aggressive straight from the start. He protects the pawn. I bring my knight out, he builds his triangular London system setup with the bishop outside the pawn chain, and then I play this move queen b6, which is always a move against the London once this bishop has moved away. So yeah, the way I normally play against the London is essentially try and go for this weakness here on b6. Also try and develop my bishop out onto this open file, putting long-term pressure here so you can't just move your rook over, and defends the pawn on b2. As you can see here, I think we're both using the openings database that they provide, which is very useful because I'm not too familiar with these openings. I don't play at that level where I need to know essentially everything. G6 prepares the fianchetto this dark squared bishop, but it also acts as a support for my bishop, which I'm going to bring out to f5. He brings his bishop out to d3, which is a mistake because I can immediately kick it out with c4. Just to point out, actually, after this move queen b6, the opponent goes queen b3. I've had this in a couple of games before. What you do is actually kick out the queen, and then you get this same position here. I think you can actually sacrifice your bishop. Yeah, you can actually just go here, and if queen takes the bishop, you've got queen takes b2, and it's a little trick. But in general, what you do is you play g6, say, I don't know, this, and then you bring out your bishop and you anchor it on this pawn here on f5, putting pressure on this diagonal here, and you're trying to go for this pawn essentially. But yeah, opponent goes queen c2 and whatnot, and then plays this move d3, and we already wanted to play c4, kick his bishop out, and then we bring out our bishop to f5 as we said before. Queen's got a move, and then we fianchetto our dark squared bishop. He brings his knight out, castles, and then he goes for this break b3, trying to get rid of his weakness essentially. While I capture on b3, he captures back. And then I try and centralize my knight with e4, trying to target this weakness here. Then he goes for b4, which is an inaccuracy according to the computer. And then we centralise, or then I centralise my rook on this semi-open file, X-raying the queen, and then he blunders, and I capitalise with a brilliant move, knight takes c3. And the idea behind this move essentially is, if he takes, then we are going to take this pawn here, and the queen is in a bit of a situation here. If it can't move anywhere on this diagonal, because we just take with the rook. Can't move here because it's defended about 50 million times. And for example, if you move it back to basically b2, for example, then it says d3 is better, but my idea was just c2. And then if you move the king or whatever, we take the queen. And the only way to avoid losing the queen to this idea of check is to move the queen out to a3. But then you still get forked. So this was my whole idea. And bang, sacrifice the queen, castles, and then I bring my knight in, and the game is basically over here at this point. A couple moves here and there, fork the rooks, and at this point I just take the queen, trade everything down, and yeah, he resigned at this point.
Ops man knows their intentions. I turn a loss to a lesson. I turn a curse to a gift and a blessing. Any girl that I've got an interest in, face interesting, body impressive. I got 99 out of 100 marks in class on my English questions.